It was late evening in the city, the kind of hour when office windows glowed like tiny lanterns against the falling dusk. The CEO of Whitestone Enterprises, Richard Whitestone, was walking down the company's private parking lot with his assistant, discussing tomorrow's board meeting. His presence was commanding, his tailored suit crisp, his shoes echoing against the cement. He didn't notice the janitor's son standing in the shadows, clutching his mother's arm, his wide eyes darting nervously at the black sedan idling just a few steps away. The boy was no older than 12, his voice trembling but urgent as he suddenly yelled out, "Don't get in the car." The sound sliced through the evening like a siren. Richard froze, his hand already reaching for the car door. His assistant frowned, startled, and the driver shifted uneasily in his seat. The boy's mother, a cleaner at the company named Ruth, gasped in horror. "Isaiah, hush. Don't cause trouble," she pleaded, tugging at her son's arm. But Isaiah refused to stay silent, his dark eyes filled with a strange certainty. "Please, don't get in. Something's wrong," he cried louder, his voice cracking with desperation. For a moment, the air was still, as if the city itself held its breath. Richard turned slowly, staring at the boy who dared interrupt his world of power and control. The CEO's lips tightened, ready to dismiss him as just another poor child of the night, when suddenly a loud pop echoed from beneath the sedan. Smoke hissed from the hood. The driver jumped out in shock. "Sir, the engines, something's off." The assistant stumbled back, shaken. The boy's warning had come seconds before disaster. If Richard had stepped inside, the engine fire could have trapped him. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the few employees still leaving the building. They looked at the boy, then at the CEO, wondering what would come next. Ruth pulled her son close, whispering furiously, "Why did you shout? Do you know what you've done?" But Isaiah kept staring at the car, trembling, whispering, "I just knew. I felt it wasn't safe." His instincts, raw and unexplained, had saved a man whose life seemed untouchable. Richard's cold blue eyes narrowed. He stepped toward the boy, studying him as though trying to read his soul. "What made you say that?" His voice was low, commanding. Isaiah swallowed hard, but his voice wavered with truth. I don't know. I just knew. I couldn't let you get in." The assistant scoffed. "Sir, he's just a kid, probably guessing." But Richard didn't move. Something about the boy's sincerity held him there. For the first time in years, the CEO used to power, money, and manipulation felt rattled by the honesty of a child who had nothing. That was the moment everything began to change. The following morning, whispers flew across the company like wildfire. "Did you hear? The janitor's son saved the CEO's life. They say the boy screamed just before the car broke down. Crazy, huh? A cleaner's kid becoming the hero of Whitestone Towers." But behind those whispers was another, darker current. What business did that kid have interfering? They shouldn't even be here after hours. That boy will cause trouble, mark my words. Inside the janitor's break room, Ruth sat silently, her hands shaking as she tried to scrub a stain from her uniform. Her co-workers looked at her with mixed expressions, some proud, some jealous, some fearful. "Go, your son's got guts," said an older cleaner, "but you better watch it. These people don't like being embarrassed." Ruth bit her lip, her heart pounding with worry. She knew how fragile her job was, how one wrong move could ruin everything, and now her son had put them in the spotlight of the most powerful man in the building. Meanwhile, in the upper floors, Richard sat in his glass office, staring out at the skyline. He replayed the boy's voice in his mind. "Don't get in the car." It had been raw, unpolished, but undeniably real. He had built his empire by trusting numbers, data, and strategy, but yesterday, his life had been saved by nothing but a child's instinct. That contradiction unsettled him. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, muttering to himself, "That boy, Isaiah, there's more to him." Days passed, and with them came both curiosity and conflict. Richard began noticing Isaiah more often waiting quietly for his mother after her night shifts, sitting with a tattered backpack, sketching on scraps of paper. The boy's drawings caught Richard's eye one evening. Passing by, he paused to see complex patterns, almost architectural in detail. Bridges, buildings, designs, far too advanced for a child his age. "You drew these?" Richard asked suddenly. Isaiah startled, clutching the pages. "Yes, sir. I just like imagining things." Richard frowned, both impressed and intrigued. "Where did you learn this?" Isaiah shrugged. "Nowhere. I just see it in my head." Ruth rushed forward, panicked, whispering, "Please, sir, forgive him. He won't bother you again." But Richard waved her off. "No, let him finish." That small moment ignited something bigger. Richard began testing Isaiah, asking him questions, challenging him with puzzles, giving him problems from the company's engineering division. To everyone's shock, the boy solved them with startling accuracy. Word spread quickly. The janitor's son wasn't just lucky, he was gifted. But not everyone was impressed. In the boardroom, whispers turned to resentment. Why is the CEO wasting time on a janitor's kid? This is unprofessional. What's next? Letting the cleaners run the company. Jealousy brewed, and soon Ruth felt the cold sting of disdain from supervisors who once ignored her. They muttered insults, left her extra work, and eyed her as though she'd overstepped her place. Isaiah noticed. One night, as Ruth scrubbed the marble floors, he whispered, "Mama, they don't like us being here." She sighed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "That's life, baby. We're not meant to be liked. We're meant to survive." But Isaiah shook his head firmly. "No, we're meant for more." Those words, spoken with quiet fire, became a spark in the darkness. Yet, just as Richard's interest in Isaiah grew, so too did the dangers. One evening, as Richard prepared to leave, the same sedan, now repaired, waited for him again. Isaiah, lingering in the lobby, froze. His chest tightened with dread. Something wasn't right. He bolted forward, shouting again, "Don't get in the car." Everyone turned, shocked. Richard paused, irritation flashing across his face this time. "Isaiah, what is it now?" But before the boy could answer, a thunderous explosion rocked the parking garage. The car burst into flames, shattering windows and sending employees screaming. Smoke billowed, alarms blared, and chaos swallowed the night. Richard staggered back, stunned. If Isaiah hadn't yelled again, he would have been inside. The CEO looked at the boy, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Twice you saved me. Twice." The company erupted in panic. Investigations were launched. Whispers turned darker. "This isn't coincidence. Is someone trying to kill the CEO?" How did the janitor's son know? Some suspected Isaiah of involvement, others of supernatural foresight. Ruth wept at night, terrified for her child. "They'll come after you, Isaiah," she whispered. "Please, stay quiet. Don't draw more attention." But Isaiah clenched his fists. "I can't, Mama. If I see danger, I can't just stay quiet." And so began the battle between a boy's courage, a mother's fear, a company's corruption, and a CEO's awakening conscience. Isaiah's warning echoed in the chaos of the burning garage. Smoke filled the air, sprinklers hissed, alarms shrieked, employees scattered in panic, their voices sharp with fear. Security guards rushed forward, shielding Richard, while Ruth clutched Isaiah with trembling arms. "What have you done, baby?" she whispered in terror, though deep down she knew her son had once again saved a life. Richard's assistant coughed, covering his mouth with a handkerchief. "Sir, we have to get you out of here. Someone planted that bomb deliberately. This is no accident." His words sent ripples of fear through the group. The CEO of Whitestone Enterprises, a man untouchable by competition, was suddenly a target. But even in that chaos, Richard's eyes stayed fixed on Isaiah. "How did you know?" he demanded, his voice rough. Isaiah shook his head, eyes wide with honesty. "I don't know, sir. I just felt it. Something told me." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Firefighters poured into the garage, shouting orders, pulling hoses. Employees huddled outside, whispering, some casting fearful glances at Ruth and her boy. A tall man in a gray suit muttered loudly, "First the engine. Now this, that kid always knows before it happens. Something's not right." Others nodded uneasily. It didn't take long for suspicion to spread like a disease. Later that night, when the chaos had subsided, Ruth carried Isaiah home through the dark streets. Their small apartment was tucked in a forgotten corner of the city, peeling paint, broken locks, the smell of damp lingering in the stairwell. Inside, the lights flickered weakly. She set him down on the old couch, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Isaiah, you have to stop shouting like that. People think you're strange. They'll blame us." Isaiah looked up at her, his young face streaked with soot and tears. "But, Mama, if I didn't yell, he'd be dead." Ruth sank onto the couch beside him, pulling him into her arms. "I know, baby, I know. But these people, they don't see you as a hero. They see you as a problem, and problems get punished." That night, Isaiah had a nightmare. He dreamed of fire swallowing the building, of people trapped inside, screaming. He woke drenched in sweat, clutching his chest. Ruth rushed to his side. "Isaiah, what is it?" he gasped. "Mama, something bad is coming. Not just to Mr. Whitestone, to everyone." She held him close, rocking him gently. "It's just a dream, baby." But deep down, she feared his dreams were warnings. The next week, Richard made a bold decision. He invited Ruth and Isaiah to his penthouse suite, a place few had ever entered. When they arrived, Isaiah's eyes widened at the vast space, the glittering chandeliers, the city lights stretching like stars. Richard poured tea awkwardly, unused to hosting. "Isaiah," he said finally, "I want you to tell me, how do you see these things? How do you know danger before it comes?" Isaiah hesitated, twisting his hands. "I don't know, sir. It's like, I feel it in my stomach, like a voice that whispers something's wrong." Richard leaned forward. "And the sketches, the designs?" Isaiah looked down. "They just come to me, like puzzles in my head. I don't know why." Ruth shifted nervously. "Please, sir, don't encourage him. He's just a boy." But Richard's eyes burned with determination. "He's not just a boy, he's a gift." He stood, pacing. "I built this company by seeing what others miss. But Isaiah sees more than me, than all of us. And if the world won't value him, then I will." For the first time in years, Ruth saw something human in the powerful CEO, a flicker of kindness, a glimmer of protection. But kindness from a man like Richard was dangerous. It drew enemies like moths to flame. 2 nights later, as Ruth finished cleaning the executive floor, Isaiah sat in the empty boardroom, sketching quietly. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Harrison stood there, his smile cold. "You like drawing, boy?" Isaiah nodded nervously. Harrison leaned closer. "Listen carefully. You may have fooled Mr. Whitestone, but not me. People like you don't belong here. Stay out of our way, or someone might decide you're more trouble than you're worth." Isaiah's heart pounded. He clutched his sketchbook, whispering, "I'm not hurting anyone." Harrison's smile hardened. "You exist. That's enough." When Ruth found her son shaken that night, he told her everything. She wanted to march back and confront Harrison, but Isaiah begged her not to. "Please, Mama, don't. They'll hurt us." Tears filled her eyes. She realized they were trapped between a CEO who wanted to protect them and powerful men who wanted them erased. The climax came during a company gala, a glittering event filled with investors, journalists, and politicians. Richard, determined to silence rumors, brought Ruth and Isaiah as his guests of honor. Cameras flashed as they entered, the sight of a janitor's family beside the CEO sending shockwaves through the crowd. Reporters whispered furiously. Some applauded the boldness. Others sneered. During his speech, Richard raised a glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you alive because of courage. Not the courage of billionaires or executives, but of a boy most would overlook. Isaiah Johnson is a reminder that greatness is not measured by wealth, but by heart." The crowd gasped. Some clapped. Others frowned darkly. Harrison's face twisted with fury. But just as Richard finished, Isaiah's stomach twisted. He grabbed his mother's hand. "Mama, something's wrong." His eyes darted toward the back of the hall, where a waiter carried a tray of champagne. The boy's breath caught. "Don't drink it," he shouted suddenly, his voice breaking through the music and laughter. The room froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Richard stared, startled. "Isaiah, what is it?" The boy pointed, trembling. "The drinks. Don't let them drink." Security rushed forward. The waiter bolted, dropping the tray. Glass shattered across the marble. Chaos erupted. Within minutes, investigators found the champagne laced with poison. Gasps of horror filled the hall. If Isaiah hadn't spoken, dozens including the CEO would have been dead. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Headlines would scream by morning. Janitor's son saved CEO again. But in the shadows, Harrison clenched his jaw. His plan had failed. And now the boy was no longer just a nuisance, he was a threat. The ballroom was chaos. Glass crunched under panicked feet as guests fled toward the exits, their expensive gowns and tuxedos brushing against security officers rushing in. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters shouting questions, microphones shoved forward. It's true, the champagne was poisoned. Mr. Whitestone, who was behind this? And who is the boy who keeps saving you? Richard shielded Isaiah with his arm, guiding Ruth and her son through the frantic crowd. His voice was sharp, commanding. "Out of my way." Security formed a circle around them, but even within the protection, Richard's heart pounded. Another attempt, another narrow escape. And again, it was the boy who saw what no one else did. Back in the penthouse later that night, silence hung heavy. Ruth sat stiffly on the edge of a sofa far too soft for her, while Isaiah curled against her, his sketchbook hugged tightly to his chest. Richard paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. His face, usually carved from stone, looked shaken. 3 times, he muttered. Engine fire, car bomb, poisoned drinks, someone wants me gone. Ruth's voice cracked. And they'll keep trying, won't they? Richard stopped pacing, his gaze shifting to Isaiah. And somehow, you know before it happens. Tell me, Isaiah, what do you see when you look at danger? Isaiah hesitated, then whispered, "It feels like a shadow crawling closer. I don't see it with my eyes, I feel it here." He pressed a hand against his stomach. "And if I don't speak, it grows louder until it hurts." Richard stared at him as though looking at something not of this world. "You're extraordinary. Boy, you may not realize it, but you've saved lives that would have been lost forever." But Ruth's face was etched with worry. "Sir, with all respect, you speak like it's a blessing, but to us, it feels like a curse. They look at my son like he's strange, dangerous, and if this keeps up, they'll do worse than look." Richard lowered himself into a chair, his tone firm. "Then I'll protect him, both of you. No one will touch you while I'm here." Ruth's eyes glistened. "With respect, Mr. Whitestone, men like you always make promises, and women like me, no promises don't always last." Her words struck him harder than she intended. He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. He thought of Emily, his daughter, living in silence in a private school dormitory, barely seeing her father. He had promised to protect her too, yet what protection was absence? The next morning, headlines splashed across every major paper: cleaners, son saves CEO again 3rd time in weeks. Some painted Isaiah as a miracle child, a prophet. Others twisted the story, suggesting the boy's uncanny foresight was too suspicious to ignore. Talk shows debated endlessly. Is this a gift, or a scam? One host sneered. Funny how trouble follows the boy wherever he goes. At Whitestone Enterprises, the tension was unbearable. Employees whispered in the hallways, glancing at Ruth and Isaiah as though they carried disease. Some approached with kindness, offering cookies, small gifts, murmured thanks. Others hissed under their breath, "Which child? He's bad luck. Mark my words, that family will bring us all down." Ruth endured it silently, but Isaiah's fists clenched whenever he heard the words. One afternoon, when a group of executives muttered insults as they passed, he snapped, "I'm not bad luck. I'm the reason you're still alive." The hall fell silent. The men sneered, then walked away, their contempt sharper than any blade. Ruth pulled Isaiah close, whispering harshly, "Don't you dare talk back. You don't fight hate with shouting, you fight it by surviving." But Isaiah's eyes burned with fire. "I don't want to just survive, Mama. I want to matter." That night, Richard sat with the boy on the rooftop garden of the skyscraper. The city glittered below, alive and endless. "You remind me of myself, Isaiah," Richard admitted quietly. "When I was your age, no one believed I'd be anything. They told me I was worthless. I fought my way up with nothing but anger and ambition. But you're different. You fight not for yourself, but for others. That's rare." Isaiah looked at him curiously. "If you were like me once, why don't you help people like us now?" The question stung. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing the boy had cut to the heart of his failures. He had spent decades building towers of steel and glass, but perhaps none of it mattered if he had abandoned the people below. As weeks passed, the danger escalated. Anonymous threats slipped under Richard's office door. A shadowy car followed Ruth and Isaiah home one night. Strange men lingered by their apartment stairwell. Each time, Isaiah felt the crawling shadow in his stomach, warning him. Each time, Ruth grew more terrified. One evening, Richard ordered a car to take them to a safer residence under company protection. But when they arrived at the lobby, Isaiah froze, his chest tightened, his voice breaking. "Don't get in the car." Ruth stiffened, remembering the first night, the very words that had changed everything. Richard frowned. "Isaiah, why?" The boy shook his head violently. "It smells wrong. Please, don't get in." Richard signaled security to check. When they opened the trunk, they found a stash of weapons. Gasps filled the lobby. Ruth nearly fainted. Richard's face turned pale with fury. "They're not just after me anymore," he whispered. "They're after you too." News of the attempted kidnapping leaked, further fueling rumors. Harrison seized the moment. In a secret board gathering, he declared, "This boy is a curse. He's turning the company into a circus. Investors are pulling back. The press is mocking us, and our CEO is blinded by a janitor's child. If Richard won't cut ties, we must force his hand. That night, Harrison ordered men to deliver a final message. Ruth returned home with Isaiah to find their door ajar. She froze. Inside their apartment was ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes torn, Isaiah's sketches shredded and scattered. Across the floor, on the wall, spray-painted in red, were the words, "Leave or die." Isaiah's small body shook as he clutched his mother's arm. "Mama, they want us gone." Ruth collapsed onto her knees, tears streaming down her face. "What do they expect me to do? Where can we go?" When Richard arrived hours later, fury burned in his chest at the sight of the wreckage. "They dare threaten you. In your own home." His voice thundered. He turned to Ruth, his tone softer. "Pack your things. You're coming with me. I won't let them touch you again." But Ruth shook her head. "Do you hear yourself? You're the reason they're after us. Every step closer to you puts us in more danger. Maybe the safest thing is to stay away." Richard knelt beside her, his eyes uncharacteristically vulnerable. "If you stay away, they'll destroy you. If you come with me, I can fight for you. Please, Ruth, let me make this right." For the first time, Ruth saw not the powerful CEO, but a man desperate to protect. She hesitated, then whispered, "For Isaiah's sake, I'll trust you, but if anything happens to him, I'll never forgive you." Isaiah watched them both, silent but determined. Deep inside, he knew the battle was only beginning. The betrayal was now out in the open. Harrison and his allies wanted them erased, and Richard, once untouchable, now stood between his enemies and the boy who kept seeing danger before it came. That night, as Isaiah drifted into uneasy sleep in the safety of Richard's penthouse, he dreamed again. Flames, screams, the sound of shattering glass, and a voice, deep and chilling, whispering in the darkness, "Next time, no one will save him." Isaiah woke, gasping, clutching his chest, his voice trembling as he whispered to his mother, "Mama, they're going to try again, and next time they'll come for him when everyone's watching." Ruth held him close, rocking him gently as tears slid down her face. She didn't know if his visions were dreams or warnings, but she believed him. She always believed him. And far below, in the city's underbelly, Harrison made his call. It's time. No more warnings. The boy, the mother, and Whitestone, and them all. The storm was coming. The rooftop burned with chaos. Flames licked higher through the tower's windows. The night sky awash in red light. Sirens wailed from the streets below. Helicopters hovered like vultures, and millions watched live broadcasts. In horror, Richard wrestled Harrison at the edge of the roof, their silhouettes thrashing against the glow of fire. Ruth clutched Isaiah against her chest. "Don't look, baby," she whispered. But Isaiah would not close his eyes. He watched with a trembling stillness, as if every heartbeat wrote itself into his visions. Harrison fought with the feral strength of a cornered man. His pistol clattered across the rooftop, sliding near Ruth's feet. Richard's fist cracked against his rival's jaw, but Harrison shoved back, teeth bared. "You'll lose everything, Whitestone," he roared. "The company, the city, your legacy. They'll remember you as a fool who let a janitor's brat destroy him." Richard's breath came ragged. Better a fool who stood for them than a coward who preyed on children. Harrison lunged, tackling him toward the edge. They staggered, heels scraping against concrete. The crowd below screamed as one, a human chorus of dread. For a moment, both men teetered over the abyss. "Papa," Isaiah cried out, though Richard was not his father. The word burst from his chest anyway. A bond formed in fire and fear. The cry gave Richard strength. With one last surge, he twisted, throwing Harrison off balance. The traitor stumbled, arms flailing. For a heartbeat, he hovered against the skyline, then plunged into the flames below. His scream cut through the night before silence claimed him. Richard collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. Ruth pulled Isaiah close, tears streaking her soot-covered face. The boy looked at Richard, voice soft. "The shadow is gone now." Richard met his gaze, shaken, "Because of you." But their trial was not yet over. The fire roared upward, smoke choking the rooftop. Helicopters circled, lowering rescue baskets. Security and firefighters pushed through the blaze to secure the survivors. The city held its breath as Richard, Ruth, and Isaiah were lifted skyward, the tower collapsing behind them in a shower of sparks. The image flooded every screen. A billionaire CEO, a black cleaner, and her son rising together from fire and ruin. It was more than survival, it was a symbol. In the weeks that followed, the empire trembled but did not fall. Harrison's conspirators were dragged into the light, their crimes laid bare. For once, the whispers of corruption could not be buried. Richard faced his board, not with excuses but with fire in his voice. We rebuild not higher, not richer, but fairer. This company belongs to the people who clean its floors as much as those who sit in its towers. And if you cannot stand for that, step aside. Some did step aside. Others followed him. The tide had turned. For Ruth, life was never the same. She no longer wore the quiet shame of invisibility when she walked through the streets. Strangers stopped her to thank her, to tell her she mattered. Yet she kept her humility, still folding laundry with careful hands, still whispering prayers at night. She never wanted riches. She only wanted safety for her child. And Isaiah grew into something the city had never seen. Schools and scholars sought to understand his gift, but he remained the same solemn boy with a sketchpad, capturing futures before they came. He smiled more now, though, especially when Richard visited. One evening, on the steps of a new community center Richard had built in Isaiah's name, the boy looked up at him. "You listened," he said simply. Richard's throat tightened. "I had to. You made me see." The city never forgot that night, the boy who warned, the mother who believed, the CEO who changed, and though shadows still lingered in alleys and boardrooms, hope had burned brighter. Because sometimes the smallest voice shatters the loudest. Silence. And sometimes a child's cry saves an empire. Moral, true power is not measured in towers or wealth. It is found in courage, compassion, and the voices we dare to hear.